How many hits do we get on YouTube for these council meetings?
Okay, about 2 minutes and
Hey,
Hello.
you're dressed up.
I am?
I normally get you during the day when you're in your workout clothes.
Pam, I dressed up just for you, and
Thank
it's not
you.
spandex.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not sad mom clothes. You're welcome.
2, 3, 4, 5. Welcome. Still missing a couple. We have a quorum at least.
Do you think some people think it's a 7 o'clock meeting?
I hope not.
That's entirely possible.
It's entire, I had to check.
Good evening, everyone.
1 minute.
Hey, Alan.
Hello.
Hello.
1 minute.
How's everybody?
We're good. How are you, Flo?
Good.
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 All right. So we're missing Karen. Hung
Hung
Ben's
Ben?
coming in. When you turn off your video, you pop around the screen other places. I have to find you again. I see. I see. Michael, you want to text Karen, make sure she's
I
coming?
just got a text from her. She's having some computer issues.
Okay. Thank you.
And you're on.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 16th, 2020 Chapel Hill Town Council work session. It's our first work session back this season. We have 5 items on the agenda for tonight, followed by a closed session for council. But we're going to have continued discussions and changes to our land use management ordinance, a conversation about improving our concept plan process, an update on public housing activities, a conversation about future items for discussion with our town attorney. And we're going to start off though with our town's update to the COVID response. But first, council members, I need to do a roll call to verify that you are here with us. So when I call your name, please say here or present or whatever you'd like to say. Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson.
Present.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Here.
Councilmember Gu. Where'd she go?
Just a moment. She's having
All right.
computer issues.
She's having computer issues. Okay, we'll come back. Councilmember Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Stegman.
Here.
Councilmember Gu, are you able to say here? I see you.
Yes, I'm here. I just have a problem connecting with the view system.
All right, the mayor
Here.
is also here, so thank you. Tonight's meeting is a work session and we do value public input. We will hope to have some time at the end of the meeting to take public input. There are other ways to share with us though too. You're welcome to email or call or all those things. But before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. We've been asked to do 2 proclamations and we've been changing that around a little bit so that we're not reading the whole proclamation anymore. We do post the whole proclamation out on social media, but we've asked Ty Nguyen to read us the first one, which is the Constitution Week, followed by, well, we'll do that one first.
All right, sounds good. So tomorrow, September 17th, marks the start of Constitution Week. The United States Constitution stands as a testament to the tenacity of Americans throughout history to maintain their liberties, freedoms, and inalienable rights. Each year, members of the Daughters of the American Revolution help us celebrate this important document. Constitution Week runs from September 17th to September 23rd. During that time, we urge everyone in Chapel Hill to work to be active and contributing citizens in our local community and our nation. We also want to acknowledge that to this day, there are still members of our country who still do not have equal protection under the law through systemic and institutional racism.
Thank you. All right. We also have Diaper Need Awareness Week. We have Ms. Anderson.
According to national surveys and research studies, 1 in 3 families struggle to have a sufficient supply of diapers available for their toddlers and infants, which can have a significant impact on a child's health and well-being. Costing up to 14% of a low-wage family's income, purchasing a sufficient supply of diapers can be a challenge for many in our community. Yet, because diapers are a requirement for daycare facilities, it is a cost that must be borne. Fortunately, in Chapel Hill, the Diaper Bank of North Carolina helps distribute diapers for families through a variety of trusted community partners. To raise awareness of this important public health need in our community, the Chapel Hill Town Council is proclaiming the week of September 21st to 27th, 2020 as Diaper Needs Awareness Week. During this time, we encourage everyone to thank the Diaper Bank for their service and to support them in their work.
Thank you. And again, both these will be posted out there on social media in their full proclamation stature. So we appreciate that. As a friendly reminder, our advisory boards are continuing to meet virtually. You are welcome to attend virtually. Information can be found on our website about how to do that. And then tomorrow night is the annual meeting for the Carolina North Development Agreement. It starts at 5:30 and it will be virtual, and there's information on our website about that. And I guess it was this morning, just this morning, Town Manager Maurice Jones and Chief Blue and I met with leaders at UNC to talk about COVID-related issues and student behavior, but things we've also started discussing and wanting to make sure that we're working together on are Halloween coming up, and the committee that's been put together to help advise what the spring semester could look like for UNC. We were told that they hope to have a decision made on what start date would be and whether it will be virtual, in person, hybrid, whatever the Board of Governors comes and says. They hope to have that decision at least before the 1st of November. There's also lots of conversations going on about many different things. So we continue to stay in touch and working with our partners just to let you know. And then Orange County Recovery Visioning Groups are happening. It's underway. Visioning meetings are scheduled for tomorrow about human services, and we'll share more information with you as that becomes available. And again, please always check the website for seeing those things that are going on. So we will, are there any other announcements? I'm sorry, didn't ask. All right, so we will move right into an update on town efforts to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Ms. Drayton.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kelly Drayton, the Emergency Management Coordinator for the town of Chapel Hill. This brief presentation will provide a few key updates on the town's response to COVID, as well as just a couple public service announcements related to overall community preparedness. I'd like to start by talking just a little bit about our long-term recovery planning efforts. Town and county staff continue to collaborate with a variety of stakeholders on our community's long-term recovery planning. This means looking ahead to when restrictions are further lifted, getting business doors open again fully, and getting people the long-term jobs and other resources and support that they need to support their family and livelihoods. This effort is being conducted with the underlying theme of community resilience to ensure that our community comes out of this pandemic stronger than when we went into it. Right now, the project team is working to compile the results of our impact assessment survey into a report, which will be finalized later this month. Unlike damages caused by other types of disasters like a hurricane or flooding, the impacts of the pandemic are not as easily identifiable, which is why this report is a crucial component of the recovery planning process. We'll use the results of this impact assessment and the insights from our key stakeholders to drive the development and prioritization of recovery strategies. Staff will be providing additional information on the long-term recovery process at the September 30th council meeting, and a draft of the long-term recovery plan will be available for public comment and review in early November. Last week, Orange County announced that the health department would be working with state and local partners to offer COVID-19 testing every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the R7 lot located at 725 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. This drive-through or walk-up testing is free and open to anyone in our community. And if you're looking for additional information about COVID testing opportunities, the Orange County Health Department website maintains an interactive database of testing locations, which can be found at orangecountync.gov/coronavirus. Now, while our staff continues to staff our emergency operations center for COVID-19, we're also keeping a close eye on Hurricane Sally, the remnants of which will impact our area as a post-tropical system starting this evening and lasting through Friday morning. The National Weather Service is predicting between 3 and 6 inches of rain from the system, which may cause local flooding in our low-lying areas. Remember, it is not safe to enter floodwaters. Just 6 inches of water can knock you over, and as little as 12 inches of water can carry away vehicles. Even as we continue to monitor the Atlantic, since we're in the peak of hurricane season, fittingly, September is also National Preparedness Month, which is recognized each year to promote family and community disaster planning. This year's theme is Disasters Don't Wait, Make Your Plan Today. For more information about the National Preparedness Month or how to make your plan, you can visit ready.gov/September. And speaking of preparedness, medical experts are urging everyone who is able to get their flu shot this year. We want to avoid at all costs what some people are calling a twindemic, an epidemic of influenza on top of a COVID-19 pandemic. Town staff are working closely with Orange County Health Department to get this word out and to remove any barriers that our residents may face, such as access to health insurance or financial constraints. We'll continue to point to and work with our local health professionals to lead the way in this effort. And finally, I want to reiterate the importance of our 3 Ws. As we wait to see if there's an increase from cases after the Labor Day holiday, we're hopeful that everyone took the necessary precautions to help limit the spread of COVID-19. The 3 Ws remain a cornerstone of our public health strategy. As communities across the nation continue to ease restrictions, the best way to protect yourself and the community from the spread of COVID-19 is to wear a face covering over your nose and mouth, wash your hands frequently, and wait 6 feet apart from people who are not in your household. And we'll continue to add our 4th W, wash your mask frequently. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Drayton? Okay, thank you very much. Then we will move to item number 2, continued discussion of Chapter 160D update to the Land Use Management Ordinance and Town Code of Ordinances. Ms. Elisa Duffy Rogers.
Good evening. Let me see if I can get my screen up and working. Am I in the correct view?
Looks good.
Lisa, this is Maurice. We can see notes
Yes.
as wide as it needs to be, I think.
There we go.
Right, thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I am Elisa Duffy Rogers, the LUMO project manager. This evening, Corey Lyles, principal planner, and myself will be reviewing the provisions of 160D and discussing some policy considerations that result from it. We also would like to point out that Jean Pomerovo is also on our 160D team. We will do a quick background on 160D and discuss 3 policy considerations with time to ask questions after each topic.
Elisa, could you get a little closer to your computer so we can hear you just a tad better? Thank you.
That isn't better, then I'll work on my settings.
Thank you.
In 2019, the General Assembly took up legislation that they intended to consolidate and modernize the enabling legislation for local land use regulation. The result of this law was Session Law 2019-111. We informally refer to this new law as 160D, which is the name of the new chapter created in the North Carolina General Statutes. In fact, there are 2 parts to this session law. Part 1 is already in effect, but does not require any amendments or updates to the town code. As you may recall, Corey and I discussed Part 1 with you back in June and July. Part 2 of the session law is what establishes 160D of the state statutes. Our land use management ordinance and other town code regulations must be brought into alignment with 160D. With the enactment of Session Law 2020-25 in June of this year, the state has given all local jurisdictions until July 1st, 2021 to make most necessary code updates, but not all, as we will discuss later in the presentation. So what does 160 law, what does this new land use law really mean for Chapel Hill? We will cover 3 topics tonight, including the town's inability to continue using conditional use district zoning, how 160D affects advisory board review of special use permits, and the appeals of decisions by the Historic District Board. We plan to continue 160D discussions with you at a work session in October. Due to the technical nature of these topics, we will stop after each topic, ask some pertinent questions, as well as entertain questions from you. The 160D eliminates conditional use district zoning from the town's toolkit for development review. We can continue to use conditional use district zoning until we either eliminate it from the LUMO or July 1st, 2021, whichever comes first. As a refresher, conditional use district zoning is the practice of combining a legislative rezoning with a quasi-judicial special use permit. It was developed in the 1980s as a method to place conditions on rezonings, which can't be done with a general use rezoning. Conditional use district zoning is problematic because it really does combine that legislative action of a rezoning with a quasi-judicial special use permit. 160D does allow the town to continue to use special use permits where they are authorized under the LUMO. Under 160D, conditional zoning replaces conditional use district zoning. And I know that is extremely confusing that both of these tools have this almost the exact same wording. And I apologize for that, but that comes directly from the state legislation. And so Corey and I are forced to continue to speak as if we're saying the same thing over and over. Conditional zoning, though, is a legislative site-specific zoning approval with conditions, and it was expressly authorized in the North Carolina statutes in 2005. With the elimination of conditional use district zoning, there are several practical considerations. As of December 31st this year, all conditional use districts, which are those shown on the zoning atlas with a -C, must become conditional zoning districts. So we need to facilitate that conversion by including language in the LUMO that clarifies what happens to existing conditional use districts. Also, when we established our conditional zoning districts back in 2017, we did not create parallel conditional zoning districts for all existing conditional use districts. So it's impossible to convert some of our existing conditional use districts to conditional zoning. We also have 2 districts, the residential special standards and the mixed use village district, that have applications coming forward in the near future that need conditional zoning, since conditional use district zoning will be eliminated by the time they get through the process. We have 2 conditional use districts that lack parallel conditional zoning districts, and those are the R3C and the R4C. And you can see those here on our map. Examples of R4 are the Birch Cove and Vineyard Square communities, which are located on Homestead Road west of MLK. We have some R3C here and here, and these are both on MLK, west on both sides of MLK near Homestead. Right now, we have conditional use district zoning for these very intense, very low intense residential districts that you see on your screen. While I was not with the town when these districts were created, they may have been created to facilitate conditional use districts for the churches, like on our previous slide, or for creative ways to develop single family neighborhoods. So, several policy choices result from the elimination of conditional use district zoning. First, should we only create parallel conditional zoning districts for the R3C and the R4C, since we have existing projects that are currently zoned that? Alternatively, we could create conditional zoning districts for all existing conditional use districts. Either choice allows us to bring our existing conditional use districts into conformance with 160D by the end of the year. So we'd like at this point to stop and discuss which of these alternatives you think is preferable.
Thank you. Do you have consequences for us for which one we choose, or outcomes, or is there a way to guide us through that?
Sure. So the first alternative is to creating the R3CZD and the R4CZD. Makes the conversion neat and easy, right? We have existing projects, we convert them. No issues at all. Right now, we have those conditional use district zones for all of those low intensity residential uses. And we currently have parcels in town that could potentially be churches. And so if we do not convert all of those to conditional zoning, then those churches, for example, would not have a development tool for R1 and R2 to use for conditional zoning. So it's a policy choice as to which one you think is most appropriate at this time. We could also alternatively make the choice that we do R3 and R4 right now, because we have existing projects that we need to convert by the end of the year. And then we examine those other low intensity districts as we move through the process to update the LUMO for 160D.
Okay. Amy, then Michael.
I know that when we first converted to made the new conditional zoning districts, one of the things we did is we kind of did it in pieces to say, listen, we're going to start with our bigger areas, and then as we get comfortable with it, then we can think about more things. That there was hesitation about using a brand new tool in our residential districts. I think that the conditional zoning tool has been a positive and I think it's been a good way to do projects in a way that Chapel Hill likes to have them done, with the kind of oversight that we like to have. So I would be okay with just going ahead and making everything the CZ districts. Now, there may be community members who want to have more discussion. I think that would be an area that we would need to look at also. But I'm personally comfortable with this as a general tool for the town.
Michael?
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, for the existing, -C districts, do we have to convert those? So is it retroactive or is it just prospective that we're looking at?
We, as of the end of this year, by state law, all of the -C things that you saw on the map that we created for you must convert.
Okay, so it's retroactive. Okay.
It's retroactive.
So then, I guess my question, I'm inclined to agree with Amy. If we're going to do it, let's just do it and be done with it. I guess, to Pam's point, you've given us two choices. And when I look at the one, should we create CZ, for all existing conditional districts? Is there a downside? I mean, is there a risk? Is there a reason why we shouldn't do that?
Councilmember Ryan really stated that when we originally did the conditional zoning, we made the choices to do the upper intensity residential districts because we were uncomfortable with the tool. And that was solely the only reason. So I don't see any downside to converting all of them to conditional zoning, because you always have the option to evaluate each individual project when they apply, and to use discretion because it is a legislative action to decide what's appropriate in each location for each application. So
So I think that my comment would be, number one, again, personal opinion, go with option 2, as it were, create for all. But I think that what we need to do, because I think back in November of 17, when we first, started using the conditional zoning tool, it created a lot of angst and confusion in the community. So I think what's important here is making sure that as we move ahead with this, we really do a good job of communicating what we're doing. And as you just said, what it doesn't do, and the fact that it doesn't take away our prerogatives, our legislative prerogatives. And it doesn't mean just because we've done this that all of a sudden, the town is going to completely turn itself inside out. Just do what we can in a very information-based way to allay what will be clearly some fears and confusion in the broader community.
Yeah, I think Cora will speak a little bit later about how we're dealing with engagement and how we're attempting to proactively get information out about everything that 160D is bringing to us. And we have a website up on the town website that gives a lot of information, and we'll continue to add through that as we move through this process.
Alan?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if there are any kind of procedural noticing requirements for a decision, say, to convert conditional use districts to conditional zoning, because it seems like it, in a sense, is a change in that respect.
Right. So when the drafters of the law drafted it, they intentionally made it so that it was a conversion, and we did not have to notify any property owners or do anything to let them know that this is changing, because whatever conditions were under the special use permit will just convert to conditional zoning conditions. So we do not have to do anything to notify landowners or property owners that are adjacent. And even, believe it or not, we don't even actually have to put anything in the LUMO, because it just happens as a matter of law on December 31st of this year. You will notice when you, hopefully when we're back together in September, we have put something in the ordinance that you'll be looking at then that does state very clearly what happens on December 31st and how any modifications to existing conditional use districts would proceed and be processed, so that applicants, as well as property owners, as well as neighbors, all understand what the process would be moving forward.
Thank you.
Amy, did you have a question or follow-up?
Just a follow-up to that. But if we did make these changes to our ordinance, would they go through the normal public hearing process with public input? Or is that just something we could do administratively?
No, that because we don't have the parallel conditional zoning districts, that will be a change to the LUMO, a text change. And it will go through the process of a public, going to the planning commission, public hearing in front of you, and then you taking action. So
Okay,
yes,
so there would be opportunity for community engagement and input before anything happened. Okay, thank you.
Okay, council members, I'll just share that I love the conditional zoning tool that we created, that we started using. It has given us more flexibility to get outcomes that we're looking for. It looks like the legislature is mandating away from SUPs, as we know. I'd see us moving ahead on doing this. We've proven the tool works well. And it was very confusing at first, and it's definitely confusing having a conditional use district. I think is more confusing than a conditional zoning tool. So we can get rid of the one title there, that will help. But we need to hear from a few more of you to say whether we're going to do everybody or just the R3, R4. You want to put your thumbs up that you'd like staff to prepare for all of it, or Gonna do a thumbs up, or I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who just wants to do the R3 and R4? Okay, well, I think you've got the go ahead to start planning for us to change them all over.
Wonderful. And the final policy consideration regarding the elimination of conditional use district zoning is, should we create CZ districts for our residential special standards conditional use district and for mixed use village? As I said, we have project applications that would like to submit using conditional zoning tool for these specific districts in the near future. And that's timely because potentially as they get through the process and get to approval, we might not be authorized to even continue using conditional use district zoning. And so we would like to, if it's okay with you, create a residential special standards conditional zoning district and a mixed use village conditional zoning district. And so that is our final question for this section.
So I've got 1 thumbs up. Anyone want to comment on choice here? All right, do you want to say, or should they proceed with doing language to create conditional zoning districts for RSSC and MUV? Thumbs up if you're good for that. Hongbin? Okay, looks like we're good.
Wonderful. So
Some of your name monikers hide your thumb, so I need to get them up there. All right, thank you.
I will turn the presentation over to Corey.
All right.
All right, so before we go into our next topic, Elisa mentioned that we do still have the ability to do special use permits under Chapter 160D. Oftentimes when Chapel Hill reviews special use permits, they are in the conditional use district framework, which will be going away. So we will not see projects come through that channel. But we have 2 main areas where we also see special use permit review, and will continue to do so even after making updates to LUMO. So we have in our use matrix, our list of uses by zoning district, certain special uses. Those are things like drive-throughs, gas stations, uses that can have impacts on surroundings and need kind of case-by-case review. So we'll still have those. We also have a rule in our LUMO that says any project exceeding 20,000 square feet of building space or 40,000 square feet of land disturbance becomes a special use permit review. So we do have plenty of projects that exceed those thresholds and come to council for review without a rezoning, without a conditional use district zoning, and that'll continue to be the case. So we just want to provide that background on how special use permits will continue. And then we want to talk about a way that 160D changes the special use permit review process. So the statute clarifies that advisory board recommendations in a special use permit process are not to be used by council as the basis for designing special use permits. The council holds a evidentiary hearing on the special use permit and should be hearing the evidence presented by witnesses at that hearing, and then make a decision based on that. The advisory board review is happening prior to that, and under 160D is not supposed to be part of the decision making. So currently we have a series of advisory boards review each special use permit, Planning Commission being the final one. That is allowed to continue happening. What we want to do if it does continue happening is to clarify in LUMO that it is a preliminary forum for reviewing special use permits, and that recommendations from any advisory boards and the Planning Commission are not being sent to council for them to look at during the hearing. So we could do that and allow that preliminary forum in the same point in the special use review process where it is now. Or we could say, well, the boards and commissions are not able to make recommendations to council, so should we discontinue their review of special use permits? I will also add that because we're not doing conditional use district zoning, we will see more projects as conditional zoning. And in the conditional zoning process, the advisory boards are able to make recommendations to council. It's a legislative process. So that will still be an opportunity. But we wanted to open it up with these two alternatives, or entertain any other ideas from council members to get your thoughts on how we should update the special use permit review process.
Jess and Michael?
So I think I'm just having a little trouble understanding this one still. I guess when Corey's laughing, he's like, yeah, well. So my understanding all along was that we got recommendations from our boards. Please stop. That we got recommendations from our boards, but during SUPs, it was about the 4 findings of fact. And so I was not aware that we were ever able to deny an SUP based on an advisory board recommendation anyway. So why couldn't we still hear from our advisory boards, but still just follow the 4 findings of fact? And so if an advisory board gave a recommendation that, you know, they just didn't like something, or that it didn't coincide with how we would have to vote in a quasi judicial environment, then why couldn't we still hear from them?
So we believe that if the recommendations of advisory boards are transmitted to council, that it creates a gray area or could possibly create uncertainty around how a special use permit was decided on, because there was information available to council that was outside of the evidentiary hearing. And I don't know if Elisa wants to add anything to that, but we believe we need to not have the recommendations sent to council for that reason.
Corey, point of clarification, because I see other council members, could the chair or somebody from the advisory board come to the public hearing and make the statement about what they had, and then it's part of the public record and the evidentiary hearing?
Well, for someone to speak at the evidentiary hearing, they would need to have standing on the project. So the context of this, what the state legislation is telling us, would imply that the advisory boards and the chairs of the boards do not have standing in the evidentiary hearing.
Okay, thank you. I had Michael.
Can I ask a follow-up? I'm sorry. So in that case, can they comment on, most of our SUPs have a rezoning attached to them? I'm assuming they can still comment on that.
So we won't have having a rezoning attached to an SUP, that is a practice of conditional use district zoning that we will no longer be doing.
Got it.
Unless they were fully separate processes, rezoning first, and then maybe later there's a special use permit for a particular part of that development. That's theoretically possible. But what will come before council first will likely be conditional zoning. And yes, they can, with that, they can review, they can send recommendations to council, they can come to the public hearing and speak.
I had Michael, then Alan, then Amy, then Hong Bin.
I mean, I guess as I listen to this and sort of look, I mean, there seems to be a clear signal from the legislature that they kind of like SUPs to have an increasingly small role in development review processes. And, you know, it seems like that, if I'm remembering correctly, with our conditional zoning, we incorporated into it the same requirements, like the 2040 rule and the other things. When we did the conditional zoning, we basically said, let's have it mimic our existing SUP process to make sure that our community feels comfortable with it. And, you know, again, I believe I'm correct in this, but one of you can correct me, that we use SUPs as a town in ways that are somewhat different from most other places. And you know, a special use permit, I think, is intended, as Corey said earlier, you know, when there's a gas station, when there's something that really does impact, you know, surrounding. But for a house, a building, you know, that is typically not the tool that most other towns use. And so it seems like the way, you know, given that our goal is to continue to have an advisory board process, and given that our goal is to, you know, be as transparent in our decision making as possible and have the flexibility to deal with conditions and requirements beyond the 4 findings, it seems like where we ought to be headed, and I don't know how to do this, but where we ought to be headed is to really be trying to phase out SUPs as much as possible, and really just, you know, build in those things about SUPs that we feel are important into the conditional zoning process, rather than, you know, really getting SUPs so restricted that nobody can talk about it, nobody can have a comment about it, because, you know, the general public, I mean, again, if it's a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing, you know, we, in some sense, been, you know, violating the quasi-judicial procedures all along, because in a quasi-judicial procedure, you're not allowed to have opinions. You're supposed to be just presenting, you know, facts and expert testimony, not just, I think it's an ugly building. So it seems to me that long-term, we ought to be phasing out SUPs and just really sort of think about what a roadmap to doing that would look like.
Alan,
And I want to make a clarification based on what Councilmember Parker said, that the 2040 rule, as he was saying, can be addressed through conditional zoning. That is an option. It can be a special use permit, or it can be a conditional zoning to do more than 20,000 square feet of building, 40,000 square feet of land disturbance. So right now, that's an option to applicants as to what type of approval they want to pursue.
Okay.
Yep. So I guess what I have is maybe more of a comment than a question, but you know, it seems to me that, I mean, and I think that staff indicated this in the questions and answers that you all have given us before the meeting, but it's really important that, you know, I think we engage our advisory boards, especially those advisory boards that, you know, currently give recommendations on decisions that come before council, you know, in the conditional use districts context. I mean, I'll be, I guess I'll be curious to hear what our advisory boards have to say. And I know that there's a plan to engage them in the next phase of this, which is, I think, the policy choices phase. But I mean, this is a pretty big shift in terms of the SUPs, and you know, us not leaning on or calling on advisory boards to give recommendations. So I just want to impress upon the importance of you know, adequately engaging and educating our advisory boards on what this means for them and their changed role with respect to conditional use districts and with respect to the council.
Amy, then Hong Bin.
Corey, if the advisory boards continue their review of SUPs, would they be able to send recommendations to staff for incorporation, just not to council?
I think we could do that. I think we'd want to maybe think about the implications to make sure we're respecting that rule that the council is making decisions based on evidence at the hearing. The staff does present a report on projects, so we'd have to think about how everything kind of adds up to that report.
Yeah, because I mean, staff does throughout the SUP process negotiate with applicants and say, well, you know, we've heard this from our stormwater board, we'd like you to do that. So there's a lot of back and forth with you guys between it. One of the things that I find very useful about the advisory boards is that they often include stipulations that I wouldn't have thought of, but that actually make projects better. So I would love to try to find a path towards having those recommendations still work their way into the process that we have. You know, I'll be sorry that when SUPs come forward, we can't be relying more on our advisory boards, but at least if we can get their opinions into the process, maybe earlier and in a, you know, in a correct and legal way, I think we should attempt to do that.
Hong Bin.
So, well, this is a question because I think that all these informations are new to us. So when you say that this SUP hearing is because it's a quasi judicial procedure, so it's supposed to be the full finding of facts, but and you said that only the ones that who have the standing in this proposal can be the ones that presenting the evidence. But how about like the experts? Like, can we call? But I mean, even in the court system, we can have that. The judge can have some experts as a witness, like expert witness. How does that play into this process?
Expert witnesses can speak in the evidentiary hearing, yes. I guess something I hear from your question is what constitutes an expert witness, and does that have any
Yeah.
bearing
So
on this idea?
Yeah. So my question is, let's say advisory board, can they be regarded as the experts that the council that identified to give them the evidence that's related to this project?
That's an interesting consideration. The law clearly states that the planning commission should not be making recommendations to council that they're using in this decision making, which could imply that they're not considered expert witnesses, although it doesn't clearly explicitly say that members of the commission shouldn't come speak at the evidentiary hearing. So we can delve into that question.
Yeah, so I think if you can find out what is the criteria for the expert witness, is there any certain kind of like credential is required? Then I think in that way, we can have that kind of support, because the advisory board, their role in this SUP process, I think, at least for the council, a lot of times is we are trying to hear from the people who are in the field, who have lots of experience in this field, or has a lot of involvement experience. So we do consider them as providing the expert opinion to the council. So I would like to know that how is that can be incorporated in the process.
Okay. Karen?
I just want to, I guess, echo what Michael was saying in terms of just trying to move away from SUPs as much as we possibly can. I think they're problematic for a lot of reasons that have been talked about, and even the 4 findings themselves. I only recently learned that we the town crafted those 4 findings, but I think they're problematic and it's so limiting that I think this is an opportunity to kind of move away from them and really just emphasize the conditional zoning, which is more effective, I think, results in better outcomes and does allow for that community and board input that we all want. So.
Okay, I think you're hearing from council members that they want to continue to allow advisory board input. So we'd like to stick with CZ whenever possible, but we'd like to find a way to still have advisory board expertise or information communicated to us in some manner that is legal, but that we want to keep that involvement in those advisory boards helping inform our decisions. So. Is that enough information for you to work through? Okay.
Yes. All right. We have one more topic, and also do at the end just a reminder of our process and our engagement. But the topic for council input is appeals of historic district decisions. This is an area where we don't have to make a change to be in compliance, but 160D offers a new option that we thought was valuable to share with council. So currently our historic district commission issues certificates of appropriateness, and if there's an appeal of their decision, it goes to our board of adjustment. 160D establishes another option, which is that an appeal of a Historic District Commission decision could go directly to North Carolina Superior Court and bypass the Board of Adjustment. So we have the option to keep it as is or to amend the LUMO to make that change, sending them to Superior Court. For considering this choice, we did a preliminary evaluation of the advantages of each option, and you see those listed here. If we keep things in the BOA realm, then it avoids court costs for the town, including possible court costs if a decision was made in favor of another party and they were awarded attorney's fees. Usually an applicant can get to a Board of Adjustment meeting quicker than they can get to a court date. So they may have a shorter time frame for their appeal to be heard. And when decisions are appealed and it stays within the town's framework, we believe there's better opportunity to critically review decisions and understand why did the HDC decide a certain way, and if it's being overturned, what does that signal a need for change? If things are appealed directly to Superior Court bypassing the Board of Adjustment, that would obviously lighten the load for the BOA. They would have fewer, they would continue to hear other things, but would not have HDC appeals on their docket. We recognize there could be tension between these two town advisory boards if one is overturning the decisions of another, and we could avoid that. We find there are a lot of reasons to keep things the way they are with the advantages of appealing to Board of Adjustment. So we can continue that current practice, but we wanted to offer a chance for council input on that.
Jess?
I really think we should keep things the way they are. One, because I don't know that tensions between the Board of Adjustment and the HDC have been an issue. So I feel like that's a solution in search of a problem. It also kind of feels like clogging up the courts and making things more expensive doesn't sound like a great idea. And also our Board of Adjustment members are amazing community volunteers who seem to be willing to do the work. So I don't know that we've heard from them that we need to lighten their workload so much that we would make this choice or that we can't rely on them. And I think they've done a good job. So I would strongly advocate that we keep things the way they are.
Alan?
Yeah, just following up on Jess's point, I wonder what members of the Board of Adjustment would make of this. I mean, they have been doing this a while, so I mean, they may be perfectly fine handling these appeals. So I'd want to know what they think.
I know we spent a great deal of time working out a form of order between the two and having better communications and training. I don't see a reason to, I don't know, it seems weird to send it right off to court. We've done some good work between the two boards, so I'm not in favor, but I'd actually like to hear from the Board of Adjustment what they think of this. So it'd be interesting to hear. So, any other council members? Do you, I guess, show of thumbs up if you want to leave it the way it is, but you would like to hear from the Board of Adjustment. All right. Who would, okay, so that means all of you. I don't think we're sending it to the court unless we hear something dramatically different from our BOA. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Final notes is just to offer up our process. As a reminder, we share this with you previously, but we are at this council discussion stage getting guidance on how to craft the changes that help us comply with 160D. We have been doing public engagement this summer, largely through our webpage, because we're in a more informational stage of, you know, what do all these terms mean and how do these processes we have today work? And then we'll, as we hear more from you all now and then in October, we'll think about what should go out to the public in terms of their input on choices, where the choices do exist. And this will be a text amendment process, which will eventually come back for Planning Commission review and public hearing and adoption. We hope to do that in the spring ahead of the deadline for making changes in July of next year. And then next steps, we will be doing another of these work sessions in October. We've broken up the topics divided between the 2 nights. So in October, we will be talking about any definition changes that have relevance on policy or development outcomes that 160D requires. We'll be talking about development agreements, vested rights, and how state law requires the timeline for vesting different types of plans. It sounds like we'll also do a little legwork on this advisory board review and SUPs and report back with any new information. And if you have come across any topics in 160D that we're not proposing to cover so far, we welcome that input as well. So I think at this point, we just want to open up if there are any final questions or comments.
Well, we can hope the legislature might change a little bit or a lot this fall, but I'm not sure that would be in time to make any of the changes in a different direction with all this stuff. So, well, thank you for the tutorial on this. All right. That brings us to item number 3, discuss the concept plan review process.
Good evening, team. Let me get the screen queued up here and we'll get started. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Madam Mayor, Town Council, good evening. My name is Adam Nicholson. I'm with the Planning Department. We're going to talk about concept plans tonight. I've got this purposefully shown here as concept plan update 2.0 because this is largely going to be a review of some information that we went over at the CCS meeting back in June. That's purposeful. That was a really fast meeting and review of the concept plan information that we looked at. So we're going to review some information from that meeting. We're going to go over some new information that staff has gathered over the last few months, and hopefully that will culminate in a discussion that we can have about where we are in the process and the thoughts that council would like to see as we move forward. So I don't have any planned breaks in this presentation. It's about 10 slides. It should take 10 or 11 minutes. So if you have questions as I go, please interrupt and we'll go through those. So why are we here? Well, first we're going to talk about some of the process, the problems with the concept plan process. There are many. We're not going to concentrate on every one of them. We would be here for a time for that. We're going to review some priorities. We're going to talk about some review options that we've developed. We're going to talk about stakeholder feedback, and then we're going to further the discussion, hopefully, with some additional conversation, response to some questions that we have, and hopefully allow you to ask some questions of staff that will give us a plan to march forward with. So this is by the numbers. This is a slide that we had in the first presentation, so not new to this group, but a good reminder and good information for folks who are tuning in to look at this. And this is just to paint a picture. Over the last 2 or so years, we've had a little over 55 concept plans come in, and this breaks down by averages how that information is submitted to the town. So you can see the first bullet, 320 days, so just shy of a year is the average amount of time between a council concept plan review and when they submit their formal application. Add to that the 6 to 9 months in the second bullet of a formal submittal, and then ultimately get to council. You're talking about 18 months to 2 years between a council review of a concept plan and when that final plan or that official application is reviewed in a public setting. The beginning conversations for concept plans has been a point of note as we've started this process. It's noted here that the average start time for discussion on a plan is 9:33 p.m. We made note that the latest beginning for a conversation on one of those plans was 11:50 p.m. Really difficult to expect anybody to, work reasonably at that time. So it's difficult. Those times are certainly difficult. And then 1 out of 10 concept plans with no formal submittal after 2 years. So what are some of the problems? So we have worked and talked with various stakeholders throughout the process. The first 3 being applicants, boards and commission and staff. So what were some of those folks concerned about? The applicants were concerned about the complexity of the process, the amount of time that is spent.
Adam, your voice is going like a little bit in and out. I don't know if you can get closer to the computer. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just having a little bit of a hard time hearing you off and on.
No, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully, let's see, hopefully I can clear up. If you still have that issue, let me know and I'll try to work something else out. But thank you for letting me know. Applicants, again, just sort of concerned about the complexity of the process and the amount of time that it takes, the amount of resources that are required to get through it. Talking with boards and commissions, they're seeking an additional context and narrative, sort of addressing town vision and how applicants are doing that, both in the narrative process as well as just showing them in the plans how they're doing that. And then we have noted the Planning Commission here's interest in reviewing concept plans. We've heard that from other boards as well. So there's a thought out there about what other advisory boards potentially should be looking at concept plans. So how do we feel about that? And then what I've got here for staff time, I've got, time spent versus project outcome. And really what that bullet is meant to say is that right now we don't have staff time allocated for concept plan review. But if we were to include that, it would just be essentially borrowing time that's used when we get a formal application and front loading it into the concept plan process so that we might provide additional information to advisory boards on top of what is a pretty standard boiled down staff presentation that we do for concept plans. And then lastly, what I wanted to hit on was some points that we got from the CCS group in June, and we'll address each of these as we march forward. One of those was to seek applicant feedback on the community concept meeting, which we'll talk about. Also getting that same feedback from the boards and commissions, and then talk a little bit about what other jurisdictions are doing. You probably wouldn't be surprised that Chapel Hill is special in regards to its concept plan process. So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Adam, if I could interrupt for a second, one thing I haven't heard you talk about tonight, and I don't think we really discussed when we discussed it at the CCES, is what are the goals of a concept? Why do we have concept plans, and why do we have concept plans review, and what are we actually trying to achieve through this process? Because if I don't know that, I don't know what it should look like. So can you talk about either what those goals are, or if we lack clarity, what your plan is for getting clarity about what the goals for concept plans reviews is in the first place?
Sure, that's a good question. And we actually have a point we're going to hit on that actual question later on in the presentation, because I think part of this conversation we want to have is understanding what council's goals are for a concept plan, what they think the town's goals for concept plan should be. Obviously, we've met with multiple groups. Each group has their thoughts about how a concept plan should work, and you can surely imagine that they are on opposite ends of the spectrum as to how the process should be. But we have to find some middle ground there. I know applicants have thoughts, advisory boards have thoughts, staff has thoughts. And so if I'm going to cruise on, we'll get to that question. But I think a point of reference for y'all to sort of stick in your brains that we can come back to is, what are your thoughts about what the goal should be? And we'll come back to that. We'll also come back to this slide. I've got this slide duplicated later in the presentation. We're actually going to end with it. It's got a little bit more text on it, but this is where I'm going to want to hopefully start our conversation of some updated priorities that we've thought about. So just keep this slide in mind. We'll get back to it, but the priorities that we've talked about are quality final projects. Most folks would agree with that, I would think. Public participation and engagement, how to facilitate that, and then allowing the applicants to pool their resources and devote them solely to the final product. So a constructed project, something that you can enjoy and experience. So we'll revisit that. So this is a good slide to talk about our thoughts and ideas about some pilot proposals. I think it's important to note that each of these could act in tandem or in isolation.
Adam, you're coming in and out again. Sorry.
Let me try it without the earbuds. We'll see if that works any better. So what we came up with were some potential ideas for review. We talked about the community concept plan meeting, an acronym for the CCM at the CCES meeting. And I've got it boiled down. Sorry, folks, here. All right. Okay. Let me know how I'm doing if I'm not coming through here. I'll have to try something else. So talking about the pilot proposals, what the community concept plan meeting was going to look like, I've got it boiled down to its sketches and stakeholders. A fairly informal meeting with council members, advisory board groups, citizens, the designers, the applicants themselves, to go over some sketches and to review the concept plan. Now, we didn't get glowing responses from either the advisory board group or the applicants about this idea, but we're keeping it on the table because we really want to go over council's thoughts about potentially doing something like that. So we'll talk some more about that and hopefully get your thoughts about it. Talking about other jurisdictions, the difference that we've really seen is that most other jurisdictions operate in some form of staff review for concept plans. Both Brian Peterson and I have dealt with this in private practice in other areas where you're meeting with a staff person, either an LA or an architect or planner to review a concept plan, and that's really where the process starts and ends. So what we wanted to do was look at potential staff reviews, and we broke them into 3 different options. One of them would be a technical team review. Right now we have a TRT team that reviews applications when they're submitted to the town. Those include key staff, stormwater, parks and recreation planning, and so forth, to go through projects. And so this would be an opportunity to engage them earlier on to give some high-level reviews. Another option could be an urban design team, and amongst staff, this might include Brian Peterson and myself to sit down and really understand the design intent of a project. Also, potentially a long-range planning option where we sit down and look at all of the long-range plans for an associated site. That could also include small area plans and any design guidelines that are applicable to make sure that we're understanding what is proposed for the site and what guidelines drive it. They're an idea for additional reviews that could include the Planning Commission in isolation or in addition to other boards, as well as a potential council review. Now, as I said before, these could act in tandem or in isolation. Either way, we would be looking at potentially providing some quarterly reports to council, similar to what you get for, say, the Blue Hill District in your quarterly presentation, to talk about what concept plans have come through and the key facts for each of those. And then maybe additional supplemental information at a light CCES meeting. So we gained applicant feedback as well as the advisory board feedback about the CCM meeting. And as I said, we didn't get great glowing responses from those, but we got a few thoughts that we wanted to talk about. And most of those center around what each group would like to see. The applicants themselves really just want to know if there's council support for a project before they submit their formal application.
You're fading in and out again. Sorry.
I'm really sorry, folks. They are looking for feedback from those with design expertise. That's capitalized because they mentioned it multiple times. Looking at keeping materials to a sketch plan level. And there was some interest from them in a voluntary council or a CCM review, if that potentially could allow them to expedite their review in some later phase. In talking with some of the advisory boards, some of their thoughts were define, whether or not we needed to define an evaluation criteria for how concept plan reviews are done. Should those change based off of where they are in the town, for example, Blue Hill or downtown or East Town? Definitely interested in the relationship of concept plans and long range plans and how those work together. And the next bullet would be where we would look at probably some increased staff involvement to help them understand that a little bit better. And then there was some light support for what we're classifying as a joint advisory review board meeting that wasn't shared by the developers, but out there as a potential option. So,
can I ask a
go ahead.
question about that last slide? So which boards and commissions gave you this feedback?
So in July, we met both with a group of frequent users from the applicant perspective, and then we also met with advisory boards. We sent out a notification to get at least 2 members from each board to join us at a meeting. The representation for it wasn't quite as strong as I would have liked it for to be, but I think we had 3 from the CDC, we had a couple from the Planning Commission, and I think we had 1 from Stormwater. So the notice was out there, but I think those were the 3 groups that were represented.
And did it go to the CDC? I mean, they were the petitioning board that brought this forward. So did it go to the full board?
This presentation and their feedback did not go to the full board.
I'm sorry, their feedback? Whose feedback? Sorry, I'm not following.
I'm sorry, we didn't ask for the entire commission's feedback on the CCM process or any of the potential processes.
Oh, okay. But they are the ones that petitioned to have this come forward, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I think in all honesty, the concept plan process, this was an opportunity for us to look at it in a larger view than just the commission. I mean, it's bigger than one group, I think. So what we sought to do was get input from multiple groups and not solely isolate it. But yeah.
But Adam, I'm going to build on Ms. Anderson's comment. At the CCS meeting, we asked you to go back to the CDC and get their feedback on this since they were the petitioners. And we have heard from them the last few days about that didn't happen.
Yeah, understood. I didn't get that we were specifically requested to do that, but we could certainly follow up with them.
Okay.
So a couple of questions. I'm not going to land on this slide, but there were some out there that I think we needed to just talk about. This is something that Councilmember Parker mentioned is what's the goal for concept plans for the town? That's something that we're gathering from multiple groups. We would certainly like to hear your feedback on. It's an easy question to ask. It's a much harder one to answer. Another one of those is, is there an evaluation criteria that we need to look at to gauge the success of any new process? And then choosing a best path forward for including boards and commission perspectives. That may include determining who the best board is to review concept plans if we see a modification there. Potential next steps, and this is in tandem with a previous slide where we talked about some of the options, is a potentially pilot review process for the Municipal Services Center, which we've got a concept plan in for now, and report back to council about how a potential modified process could go with that. And then we're going to go into our priorities and how they shape the pilot. And this is sort of revisiting the slide from earlier. I have a few notes here. So we talked about quality final projects.
Adam, can I interrupt you for a second? Because I have to comment. I'm sorry, but it feels like we're doing this backward. You've sort of laid out changes. You've laid out potentially a pilot, and we don't even know what our goals are yet. And if we don't know what our goals are, we don't know what's wrong with how those goals are not being met by the current system. And so therefore, I don't know how we can define what a new one should look like. So it seems like we're starting from a solution and then working back to the problem. I mean, I understand that people don't like the concept plan. And I also understand that people don't like it because it's not detailed enough and because it's too detailed, which obviously is a difficult thing to reconcile. But until we have a clear sense of what the goals are, I just don't see how we can be talking about doing pilots and making changes. I'm just really sort of taken aback by the logic that's being applied here.
Sure, and we're not looking for, you know, action on moving forward with any of those plans. What we're really trying to do is make you aware of the conversations we've had over the couple of months, and we really need to dive into what town council thinks the goals for a concept plan process should be. And that's really where we would, I mean, ultimately like to end the conversation, is really taking some time to get y'all's feedback, because that's not something that we've had time to dive into yet.
Are you finished with the slides?
All right. Yeah, well, I can finish this one and then hopefully we can jump off into discussion. But, you know, a few points here: quality final projects, great goal. What I have here is direction versus design team, and that no matter what we do, or you know, we could take a lot of steps as the town to ensure how this process goes. Ultimately, that's going to be handed over to a team of designers and developers and a GC who have to spend money and create a construction plan to get this project to fruition. So just noting that there's a lot that will happen after the concept plan process starts. How do we facilitate good conversations to get to a final product? And then we wrote here for allocating applicant resources to the final product. That's just trying to figure out a way to say, you know, if an applicant is able to save, you know, $10,000 up front with the multiple meetings and time spent, are they then able to potentially pour that back into the project and directly affect and impact how that would be? So if they were able to save that money, and instead of using a concrete sidewalk, they were able to replace that in a portion with brick pavers or porcelain pavers instead of brick pavers, and that creates a change in the impact of the process. So I'd like to stop here. And really, I think Councilmember Parker's made a good point. Our goal really needs to be, I think, we're curious as to what you think the goals should be for the process and what these priorities look like, and really get some more information to shape as we go forward.
Okay, thank you. I have Alan, then Amy, then Jess.
Yeah, you know, one thing, and this is to Michael's point, but one thing that would help ground me in this discussion is, you know, just maybe some background on how this concept plan review came into place in the first place. I mean, what was council's intent at that time? What was council's goals? Would you be able to speak to that, Adam?
Yeah, it was actually originally a group of active designers who formulated an idea to sort of get together and vet projects. And then it was ultimately, I think in the mid-90s or so, turned over to being reviewed by the Community Design Commission as part of its formulated charge. But it was, you hear that term sort of back of napkin sketch, and the folks who have been involved with projects in Chapel Hill since the 80s use that because that's the term that they used when the process started, as a group of designers getting together and attempting to help the town determine whether or not a project would be, you know, feasible and viable and successful.
Alan, is that it?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm wondering. You know, I get that the council at that time, I suppose, wanted to help themselves determine whether a project was viable. I guess I'm wondering more specifically if that council had particular a particular sense of how they could come to that determination, what information they wanted at that time. Because this review process has changed over time, right?
That's correct. I'd have to do a little bit more digging to give you some more information on that, but I can certainly, you know, engage with some other staff and see what else we can pull together for your review, certainly.
Yeah.
Amy, then Jess, then Ty.
My understanding is that the goal of the concept plan was to give applicants a way to sort of toe the waters on a design before they came and they did all of their engineering and their stuff, for their formal submittal, that they could come in and say, listen, we're thinking about an office building here. How do you think that would be received and what would be your concerns? And so I think it was designed to be a kind of a simple process. It was designed to save people money, but to give applicants an idea of how their project might be received, so that they said, okay, it's worth spending the money to develop this, or wow, nobody liked that. We should back off. So, and I think that's still an admirable goal. We have plenty of project review that already goes on once people have formally submitted an application. I don't see front loading another big process in the front. So I like the idea of a concept review as a constrained thing. I think part of the issue, though, that happens right now is that we don't get the context information, especially that we need to actually for people to actually evaluate a process. So I know that it's staff policy and staff resources are allocated so that they take the applicant's material and they just bring it forward to the CDC without doing analysis. And so that's how our resources are allocated now. I think that it would be especially useful to have comments, say, from Brian Peterson on the project, to have had the stormwater look at it and say, yes, there are stormwater considerations here, or no, we really don't have issues like that here. So some kind of very high level information that would accompany these plans, so that we could then say, okay, somebody's planning on building 90% of the site and there's a giant RCD running through it, right? Stormwater has come and said, wow, you're going to have real issues here. That's important things for us to know if we're going to tell an applicant, yeah, we think you could reasonably move forward with this or not. So in terms of taking it to like the community meeting or the joint board meetings, I would much rather have staff spending their time sharing their professional expertise with me than running more community events. Part of the issue now is during the concept plan process, because you're going to different boards and you come to the council and you're not getting consensus, right? You're hearing opinions. The applicants already have a wide range of comments that they take away from this. So I think adding community, adding lots of other boards, I think that would just make that worse and more confusing. I can see adding the planning commission if they chose to get involved, because they take a higher level, more cohesive look. So they could, in a way that the CDC doesn't look at, say, use in an area, or, does this go with our small area plan here? The CDC could provide that level of review. So I think that would be worth exploring. And I think in the original petition from the CDC, they also said that the applicant can provide some of this context information. So right now I've seen concept plans that come through really in a very finished state. I know applicants are kind of torn, because if they come in with the actual napkin design, they're worried people won't understand what they want to do. But if they come in very finished, then they've spent a lot of resources. So, if the applicant could come in and maybe pull back a little bit on how finished their plan is and come in and say, okay, we have context for you and we're going to help you with that. So I guess, just to summarize, I like the concept plan process, but let's keep it simple. We need a way to really vet these projects more broadly, not just, we like the elevation or we think that the house is too close to the road, right? We need a way to do better than that.
Okay, Jess, then Ty, then Hongbin, then Karen.
I totally agree with all of Amy's points. I think the joint planning meeting probably won't be particularly well attended. And I don't think folks want another meeting to go to. Also, I think it will hamper some of the kind of board specific conversations that do need to happen. I do think I would completely agree that we don't do our best work at 11:50 at night. And I think we need to find a better solution. We need to find a solution to that, but it's not going to be to just have another meeting. So I think I'm not sure that our primary goal should be solving a time issue. I do think, I understand the concern about staff resources, but I think that it's a worthwhile investment if we really get better projects. I also would agree that that context is really critical, and it doesn't have to be that the staff is doing huge amounts of work, but it could be just letting us know this is something that I would need to look into. I have, I would have a concern here potentially. I would need to look into it. Another thing, we have to use our traffic data better, and we need to use it sooner, because I think we are getting it at the end and it feels very disjointed. So I think having that on the front end and having some sort of traffic analysis would be really important. I love the idea of a strong design review from the beginning, and I also like the long range planning. I do think that we should be trying to figure out not what kind of shrubs we want on the front. We want to know, does this fit in with our long-term planning? Is it the kind of uses we want? And not get into the nitty gritty. So I think helping us too, to really frame the questions well, and to have kind of going from the big picture down to what are considerations for this site, or what are things that we're going to want here? What are our town needs, or what's something that this site could potentially offer us, like an extension of a greenway or a green space or affordable housing. I mean, I think all those things we need to know really big picture, does it fit in with our long range planning and our town goals? And I think we need help doing that, but I do think we need a lot more context on the front end, because I think it will really make a difference, and it's a time that we can make the most impact on some of these projects. I really do feel strongly that the last time we did ask for this to go to the CDC made this petition, and I think their petition has a lot of great information in it, and the chair sent us that petition this afternoon again. So I think looking back to that and incorporating that information, I understand that it's not just about the CDC, but I do think that we need to get their feedback. They've also been the ones that have been the most involved. Them and HDC have been the most involved in this process. So I really do want to hear from them. But I think if we could kind of have a structure where it's around key questions that the applicant and the staff want the council or whatever board it is to consider, I think that will be really helpful. And I would agree. I think if planning, I can see planning having a role in this, but I'm not sure dragging in every single board makes a lot of sense. But I do think, I also would agree with Michael that we need to think about what are our goals, what are we trying to accomplish, and then go from there. And I think that will help us get to a better place, because we kind of know it's broken, but I'm not sure we're there yet in figuring out how to fix it.
Okay. Ty, then Hong Bin, then Karen.
Gotcha. Yes, I definitely agree with a lot of what's already been said, especially Michael's point about figuring out what our goals are for this process before you really dive into trying to fix the process. I think we all can agree and know that it's broken. I would also be interested to hear some feedback from the boards before we tinker around with that process. I agree that we don't need to add another meeting for all the advisory boards, and I think it would be poorly attended. But if I remember correctly, we did kind of like a joint board meeting for approving for looking through the Rosemary project because of the expedited timeline. So I think they're exploring the potential for having more joint board meetings to replace individual boards reviewing the concept plan might be a good idea. I agree that there are some board specific conversations that need to happen, but also, it seems, and from my experience being on a board that reviews concept plans, it seems that whenever a concept plan comes to us, each board kind of within their specific domain ends up requesting something, and sometimes it can seem like there are competing interests amongst boards. So I think having some of those boards in the same room can help that discussion. And there might be some cross-pollination between, the different types of expertise that exists on different boards. I definitely think that the concept plan should be simpler. It does seem that developers and applicants are, spending quite an amount of resources to get the plan to the point it is before it comes to us. And this, takes away from their ability to provide some of the other stuff that we may want in terms of community benefits, and towards having a better final product. And then in terms of the traffic, yeah, I think that we as the town collect and have a lot of traffic data, and we could be leveraging that a lot better and not necessarily needing to, pay out to have a TIA done by some consultant for every project that we see. And I think that is everything I have.
Okay. Pong Ben, then Karen, then Michael.
Well, I think for this concept plan reviewing process, I think we have several goals. Well, first, I think that we want to make sure that the projects that are clearly not viable will be screened out at early time. I think that is very important because we do not want the applicant to invest in a lot of time and resources, and in the end they found that, well, it's clearly that there's some components of the project is clearly not viable. So I think if these are the things that we can give feedback to the applicant as early as possible, I think that is beneficial for both the town, the community, and the applicant. And I think you mentioned in your presentation about this technical team. I would think that that probably is a good venue for our staff. Let's say the stormwater staff, or the traffic and transportation staff, or environment staff, like the ones who have expertise, who have invested a lot of time in evaluating those projects, and know that where is the hard stop, where is the red line that that there is a clearly that this project cannot move forward or has a big problem or with a big question mark. I think these things, I think we do want our staff to give those feedback to the applicant as early as possible. And then the second point I want to make is, I think another goal for the concept plan process is to take an initial temperature in the community and say if there's something that's how the community is thinking of this project, given the initial information that's provided by the applicant. I feel that step is important as well. Let's say, I still remember the first project that I reviewed when I was coming to the council is the project that I was at Trailer Park on Weaver Street, Weaver Dairy Road. So I think these kind of things, we need to know early on. I think that it doesn't make sense for the developer to invest in lots of time and efforts, and then without the awareness or understanding that there's a significant community concern for this project. I think these things need to be fielded up, bubble up. These concerns need to be bubble up early on. So I would think these two components, one is the technical review by our town staff who have expertise and the knowledge and experience in this field. I think it needs to be the applicants need to be informed, and the other advisory board and council needs to have an understanding of that early on. And then second, I think it's very important to get a community temperature. Is there any significant concerns that can be bubbled up as early as possible? I think we need to do that we should do either by joint advisory board meeting or community meeting, or community and advisory board meeting together, combined some session. But the goal is to have those significant community concerns bubble up as early as possible. I think for the rest of it, with regard to whether or not it conforms to the town's long-term or long-range planning or goals, I think these things probably is it's more appropriate to be evaluated by the council. I think these are different components of the community, I think should play the role, and that they're both the staff, the community, and the council has a role in both improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the concept planning process. And I think that each party has a role in it, but we do not want the process to be front-loaded too much, so it becomes overburdensome and actually does not serve the goal that we want to accomplish.
Michael?
Sorry, Karen, then Michael, I was muted, sorry.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start with what I don't want. I think we agree the current process isn't really working. I don't think it's getting us the results that we want, and it's time consuming. I very much agree with Amy's statements about simple. I think the concept plan stage should really be that thumbs up or thumbs down type of decision. Whatever we do, I just beg that we don't make it more expensive. We've already touched on it some, but it's not just do we get better tile, but it's passing on whatever costs we add, just get passed on to whether it's higher rent, higher housing costs, whatever it is, they get passed on. So we get more expensive as a town every time we add another review or another report or whatever it is. And we know that our process, once they submit an application, is incredibly thorough. So I don't want to have them do things twice or invest before they've even submitted an application any more than is needed, because we actually are the ones who end up paying for it as a town. And I think the council spends too much time on development. So anything we can do to cut back so we can focus on other priorities as well would be a plus. I think we have, I'll get a little more to proactive ideas here. Obviously, as a town, we have a ton of plans, of strategies, and it does seem like we can ask and try and make sure that when developers are coming with an idea, that they are reading those and reviewing those. The onus is on them rather than on our staff to educate them on them. I mean, if they really want to invest in the town and do something here, the onus is on them to understand our values and our priorities. And, I wonder if there can be some kind of checklist or job aid. Is there an RCD? This is what you need to go learn. Is there, something staff can hand them to make sure they are doing their homework, but that it's not on more staff time to teach them. I don't think that should be the staff's job. I think it should be the applicant's job. I think I would like, in terms of what is the best practice for this, I don't know. Again, I agree. We need to decide what we're trying to achieve, but I'm wondering and guessing there is some research out there on that about best practices, and sometimes they can be counterintuitive. Spending more time doesn't always result in better outcomes. So I'd be interested in knowing what some of the research says on how we get the best outcomes, the highest quality that we want. And I wonder, I think Jess maybe had brought this up, somebody did, just this idea of having some key questions, I think would be really helpful. So whoever it ends up going to, whether it comes to council, board and council, that we're all answering the same questions, because I do think, as has been pointed out, a lot of times they get different input from different boards, and then they come back to us and go, well, I changed this because I heard it at the CDC, and we're like, but we told you this other thing. And so then they're frustrated, they change it back, it's more money, it's just kind of, everyone gets frustrated. So if there were some just really key questions that have to be answered to help decide whether it's worth moving forward into our extensive process, that's really the level I would see this concept plan idea staying at. So I agree with Ty about, use existing traffic data, existing strategies, reports, whatever, not asking them to pay for studies before they've applied. So yeah, I would say simple. I feel like our staff are already totally overworked and overwhelmed. I don't want to add more to their plates. And cheap. That's what I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, so in terms of the goals, I see this as having two broad goals. One is is this project, the right type of use for the part of town that it's being suggested for? Is an office building the right thing to put here, or is an apartment building the right thing to put here? And that gets at the issue of, the long-term planning. Does this, to the extent that our, comprehensive plan and our land use is reasonably specific, does it comport with our long-term goals for that particular part of town? And then if the answer to that is approximately yes, what are the key features of the project? And, do those key features, again, comport with the way we view that part of town evolving? So if it's, does a 6-story building fit here, or does it need to be 3 stories? Is 200,000 square feet too much, too little? I think those are the kinds of things that the council needs to be thinking about as we look at a concept plan, with the ultimate goal of giving a developer enough information to decide whether the project as they have it conceived, with or without modifications, is worth taking the risk of investing what can be hundreds of thousands of dollars in a full planning review. And I think the way to get at that is, I'm a big Atul Gawande fan, and is through checklists. I mean, if we could have for the concept plan a standardized list of questions or information that we want the applicant to present, it doesn't have to be lengthy. It doesn't require, going out and doing independent studies. But I think, as Karen said, it does require them to look at the existing plans. So, one of the questions could be, how does this project fit in with existing plans, whether they're a small area plan or our bike plan, our mobility plan, our greenways plan, but use a standardized process, a standardized checklist with some modifications to help make it easier and predictable for everybody. So applicants know what they have to do for a concept plan, and reviewers, whether it's a council or an advisory board, knows what they're going to be getting. And I think the last part is, I think some reasonable but minimal involvement of staff in helping to guide that and highlight key issues for the council. Is there something about what this developer is proposing that the council really needs to focus its attention on? I don't want to get into a detailed review. We have a detailed process. Once somebody files, it gets a thorough stormwater management review. It gets, all of those things are taken care of. But let's make sure that they're, help the applicant and ultimately the council understand if there's anything about this project that has a big red flag associated with it. So we get to those things for our benefit and for the applicant's benefit early. Thanks.
Okay. I'll just add in my comments too. Adam, can you tell us about how many per month we do of these when we're in session? How many concept plans we have?
I can speak specifically to the CDC because I deal with them more often. I'm not involved with council review, but I mean, for example, we have 2 this month. I would say, 1 on average a month is probably pretty close, where, we have 2 this month, but we haven't had any the last 2 months. So, 1 a month is probably a pretty close yes.
Okay, so the manager and I can look at that when we're doing agendas. I mean, I was told that concept plans always come last. So if we spend a lot of time on all the other items beforehand, they're last. I thought about moving them to, once in a while to work session, because we don't actually vote on concept plans, but I'm not sure what that does to public involvement. We'd have to let them come be involved. So that's an interesting thing to sort of process. But I'm in agreement with a lot of the comments about, I would like some at least high-level staff involvement with those red flags you heard about, or a checklist, or just some kind of contextual. Every time they come forward, it looks like it's on a blank piece of paper on an island by itself, and none of our parcels are like that, and it's really hard. I would say that I've heard some of the community meetings have not been attended at all on some of these concept plans. Some have. And that maybe coming to the CDC or the Planning Commission, whichever route we end up going down with this, presents a forum so they can actually hear our advisory board members asking questions, and the public can be engaged at that point. I know others have talked about having a joint advisory board forum for these projects. The problem is then no one's then the developer's leading the discussion, right? Instead of having our advisory board folks leading the discussion and asking the types of questions they normally ask. So I think there's some ways to combine some of the meetings, yet I understand wanting to have different eyes on it as well. I know that when Brian has gotten involved in some of these projects before they even come down the path, they've just had a better outcome. He sees things that our eyes aren't trained to look at, and the developers seem to be, I don't know, actually okay with it. I've heard many of them say he had some really good ideas that we have now incorporated. And so I think there could be some of that from our other staff members as well. I don't know if it's Kumar for traffic or Bergen for long range or what it is, just to give that high level of this works, but this is a concern or this is a flag so that we can know that. And then I've tried to, at council meetings, try to get back to the applicant, 6 of us thought this or all of us said that, and tried to give them some consolidated feedback, but it's hard because it can be all over the map. I've also seen developers listen to what we had to say, and we were pretty unanimous in a lot of our decisions, and they just ignored it. So, it's not just us, it's them too. Sometimes they're not willing to change their baby at all, and they're going to take their shot down with the application process. So it's been an interesting journey, I will say that. I don't like starting anything at 11:50 at night. That doesn't feel good from my side either, because I don't feel like I give it my best attention. So we'll work with more of those. I don't want to say to developers or applicants that we can only do 1 or 2 a month. That's it. So we need to figure a better way out with that too. So was that a lot of feedback that you were?
Yes, ma'am. This is what I was looking for. I appreciate y'all's thoughts and concerns, questions. Keep those coming, and we'll keep doing processes to update y'all, and we'll get back to all the groups probably next month to get some more thoughts. So we'll keep working towards it. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That brings us to item number 4 then. Receive an update on the public housing activities. Welcome, Ms. Brody.
Well, thank you. Let's see. So I'll give you one caveat. My lights just flickered, so I hope I will be able to stay with you the entire time. If not, I'll just try to sign off and come back in. But good evening. I'm Faith Brody, the Chapel Hill Public Housing Director. I have 15 slides, and it'll take me approximately 20 minutes to present them. This evening, I'm here to provide an overview of Chapel Hill's public housing operations, share additional information about the Housing and Urban Development HUD's office, evaluation of our performance, and also provide a brief update of the master plan presented to you in April of 2019. Public housing has been a traditional means of providing decent, safe, sanitary, and affordable housing to lower income households since the Federal Housing Act of 1937. In order to better meet the mission here in Chapel Hill, the Housing Authority became a town department in 1987. In 1987, the council and manager believed that making the authority a department would reduce costs, create welcoming forums for our residents, increase efficiencies, and improve the physical appearance of the apartments and the surrounding landscape. Since its development, public housing here in Chapel Hill has pursued a scattered site model to avoid developments that concentrate large numbers of low-income families in one location. Our largest neighborhoods are South Estes with 44 apartments, Craig Gomains with 40, and Trinity with 40. Our funding sources provide for the preservation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of our units. We also have a contract with HUD to make sure we're able to provide programming, the ACC, Annual Contributions Contract, for public housing residents that can lead to increased economic self-sufficiency. While not exhaustive, the funding we receive is to ensure that we are able to fulfill 6 primary functions: timely rent collection, maintaining 100% occupancy through a robust admissions and unit repair program, preservation, maintenance, and rehabilitation of all 336 apartments, management of the funding, policies, and procedures of a public housing agency, coordination of a Section 3 program to obtain secure employment for all eligible residents, and to ensure that residents that are required to complete community service to offset their housing subsidy are provided information and access to community service programs. We submitted our master plan to council in April of 2019 to demonstrate our plans for preservation, community engagement, and organizational excellence for the next 10 years. Prior to March 2020, when we encountered the arrival of a world pandemic, we were able to hire a maintenance supervisor, Andy Reeder, hired a management analyst to assist in tracking information and being more alert to trends, Stacy Todd. We contract with a second contractor to improve the time it was taken to complete repairs in vacant units and take families from the waiting list and move them into homes. Repair and restored 56 roofs in 2 of our neighborhoods, and restored a unit destroyed by water damage in Church Caldwell. COVID-19 brought about some significant changes to our operations and the lives of our staff and residents. Prior to COVID, we had an average household rent of $374. After COVID, or as of September 3rd of this year, we have an average rent of $248. Prior to COVID, the percentage of households with employment income was 64%, more than half. As of September 3rd, it's 43%, significantly less than half. The percentage of households with no income was only 6% before COVID. Now, as of September 3rd, it's 11%, and it's continuing to increase. At our weekly food distributions, we've gone from an average of 400 individuals a month to a high of 7,000 individuals for the month of April 2020. As of September 15th, 135 households had not paid their rent. That's 135 out of 294, roughly about 46% of our tenants. We've completed 3 separate distributions of masks to public housing residents and food bank participants, about 4,500 masks. And our primary focus has now shifted from restoration and maintenance to keeping our staff and residents informed and safe by reducing unnecessary exposure opportunities. So our master plan demonstrates how we're doing business and what our plans are for the future. HUD, however, evaluates our business in accordance with the Public Housing Asset System, PHAS, which we refer to as FAST. FAST makes an assessment on how well a housing agency is managing its asset management projects. You'll hear us refer to our property as AMPs. That's where the term projects came from. In November 19, you received notification that we had been designated troubled for failing to achieve an acceptable score on the FAST accounting system. I'd like to explain how these indicators are evaluated and why our score was low. You see, for a total of 100 points, this is the areas that we're evaluated in. 2 of the indicators assess our occupancy rate, management, and the capital fund program. Due to the structural concerns and our interest in the safety of our residents, Trinity has been empty since March of 2018. That takes 40 units out of availability for waiting list applicants. Until we complete the reimagined process for Trinity, our vacancy rates will remain below that which HUD, as well as the rest of us present, prefer. This slide demonstrates the point breakdown. Prior to COVID-19, we were showing improvement in the areas of tenant accounts receivables by reducing the number of repayment plans that we made available to our tenants, as well as the accounts payable by creating a new tracking mechanism for invoice receipt and timely payment. This slide demonstrates our scoring, which earned us the troubled status, which we still maintain. In the capital fund area, we earned 5 out of 10 points. 5 points are assigned if a housing authority or housing agency obligates 90% or more of its capital fund by the obligation end date with no sanctions. We did that. We got our 5 points. The next portion of that assessment is the occupancy rate. It measures the occupancy rate at the fiscal end after adjusting for approved vacancies. 0 points are assigned if the occupancy rate is less than 93%. With Trinity's vacancy, remember we're talking about 40 units, and all of our other units being occupied, our vacancy rate will at best be 88.1%. That's 296 out of 336. So the troubled status required HUD to create a recovery agreement with us to help us progress out of the troubled status. Again, with COVID-19, there were no more assessments done from June of 2019 until the present. They have not yet rescheduled any assessment. So we're still in the troubled status that we received last year. This agreement created a host of performance targets and strategies for meeting those targets. The recovery agreement provided specific actions that, when completed, would increase our scoring capacity. The first element of that agreement was to make sure that we provided information to increase our board's knowledge and understanding of how the housing program works. The town manager provided you a link to Lead the Way, a free online self-paced training designed to increase understanding of the many HUD acronyms as well as the FAST scoring system. Both the manager and I are available if you have any questions about the video. Oops, sorry. Our efforts since November 2019 have been to meet and exceed the performance targets established by HUD in the recovery agreement. Council has received that Lead the Way training information. Public housing staff is making quarterly update reports starting with February 2021. Capital funds have been properly obligated and expended. Plans for Trinity repositioning continue. And we're reducing tenant account receivables by reducing the number of repayment agreements that we have with our tenants. We successfully submitted a disposition demolition application to HUD for Trinity after our appearance before you on May 20th and our conversation about how we wanted to reimagine Trinity. We had to demonstrate that necessary modification and or rehabilitation to the project was not cost effective, and only demolition and new construction would meet our need. This will authorize demolition of the units at Trinity while we design the RAD conversion and remove those 40 units from our FAST assessment. We will then be assessed on the 296 units and allow us to achieve more points for having them occupied. The first of the public housing quarterly reports will cover quarters 1 and 2 and will be shared with you in February of 2021. They will also cover the physical maintenance, financial management, and the capital fund management, as well as tenant, applicant and resident information. I understand that this is a lot of information with brand new acronyms. Hopefully I have provided some margin of understanding of where we are and how we got there. And the video Lead the Way can fill in the gaps that I have left. I'm prepared to address any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jess, followed by Alan, followed by Han Bin, then Karen.
Thank you, Faith. I had, I guess, more of a comment that I understand why we have the status we do with HUD, but I also feel that we and you all really made the right choice in closing Trinity when you did, that we didn't end up with a McDougald Terrace situation. So I think it's unfortunate that that HUD counted it against us, that we closed something that was unsafe and needed to be reimagined. So as much as, and I also actually, I should add too, that I really appreciate that you all have kept us updated and that we're not in the dark about what's happening with that. So I guess I understand that it creates a lot more work and that it's not great to have the status we do with HUD right now, but I also feel like it's for a good reason. So I don't, I think if we kept folks in Trinity just so that we could keep our numbers where they're supposed to be for HUD, that would be a huge mistake. So that being said, are there, what are the thoughts about kind of providing support to, I mean, that's a huge, it's a huge number of folks who are not able to pay rent right now and who have lost employment. So I'm wondering what are we doing to target support and assistance to kind of, I mean, I know people around the country are dealing with it, but I'm just wondering what we're doing in particular to target those families and individuals.
Well, one of the things that we're attempting to do with our Housing 2 officer, Sabrina Smith, is to get information to the residents, because if they come to us and tell us that their status has changed, there are mechanisms that we can employ with HUD to not have it bite us so much, where they will recognize that this person's income or their status has changed, so we get a different evaluation for them. When they don't come to us, that's when it starts to count against us. So Sabrina's done very good at reaching out to the residents, and we put it in our newsletter. We got notes on the door that if your status has changed, just come let us know. Don't sit there and hope that it's going to get better, because it just gets worse for you as well as for us as a housing agency.
So that makes sense. I guess what I'm asking is, what kind of supports are we providing in terms of job searching? It sounds like obviously those folks know about our food distribution sites. I'm sure they know about the other supports that are available, but I'm just wondering in particular, kind of trying to target our residents who now find themselves unemployed or underemployed. What are we doing to kind of fill the gaps for them, just beyond rent and beyond the status with HUD? What are we doing to help them with job searching, as well as other kind of interim supports while they're looking, like things they may need that they're just not able to afford right now?
So we have a lot of connections with our nonprofits in the area, and they often put out information. So we do share that with the residents. We also, because of what I mentioned in the presentation, Section 3, any contractor that comes on our property to do work makes positions available for our residents. So we have a new intern from the School of Social Work is going to be doing a skill assessment to see if there are residents that have skills that they're not even aware of, if you will, that can be used by our contractors. So that is also employment. So we continue to partner with our nonprofits. We continue to talk to the contractors about hiring some of our residents, and we continue to get the information that we receive out to our residents in a variety of ways, through the newsletter, through email, through flyers on their door.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Have they indicated anything else that they feel like the town could provide that would be of assistance? Do we know?
Well, we do it. They ask for training continuously. Unfortunately, in this COVID area, it's really hard to provide training to more than 6 people. And then we have to have a vendor who is willing to either come on site or something that we can do virtually. And virtually is hard to assess a real hands-on training, which is most of what they want to receive, like forklift operations, repair, small repair jobs, appliance repair. It's hard to actually get that kind of training in a virtual environment. So another hit for COVID.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a few questions, so please bear with me. So my first question is related to our trouble status. So I just want to be clear, but does our trouble status, does it have anything to do with other factors aside from Trinity Court and the vacancies created in the view of HUD?
Well, there are several areas that were evaluated in. So during the physical examination, there were some deficiencies found, and that would lower our score, but those deficiencies were quickly repaired. We're also evaluated on how timely we pay our bills. So that meant we had to get with our contractors to make sure that they submitted the invoices in a timely manner, so we could pay them in a timely manner. So yes, there are other areas that we were found deficient in. All of those were correctable. we can't correct the vacancy report.
Got it. So the other factors aside from Trinity Court, are you saying those have been corrected?
Yes, sir.
And then my second question is, with respect to the Lead the Way training, I know that it's a self-paced training and it's part of a recovery agreement. I was just thinking, is there a deadline for completing that training? Because I'm thinking that with the recovery agreement, there's probably some timetable or timeline that we've got to be operating under. But I just want to get some clarification. Is there a deadline for completing this
There
training?
was a deadline. The deadline has passed. Again, because of COVID, we were granted an extension. So now we're looking at June of 2021 for all of the board members who have at least gone through the first phase of Lead the Way.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then I understand that there have been challenges with finding recruits for the residential advisory councils. And I know I probably asked this question at a prior session, but would you mind just telling us about what the challenges have been in recruiting folks for
Not
those
at all.
councils?
I'm going to go pre-COVID first.
Yep.
Pre-COVID, there was some challenges in what time the meetings were held, because prior to when there was a real active, robust residential council, a lot of them were retirees. So they like to meet in the daytime. Through attrition and through the aging out, as they left the board, younger people were attracted to the board. They wanted to meet in the evening. Well, you got 5 that want to meet in the evening and 6 that want to meet in the day. So at some point they were flip-flopping where this month they would meet in the day and next month they would meet in the evening. And I think people just got confused or forgot, but they started missing meetings. So then it was trying to recruit new people to come on board, and we get a little traction for about 2 months, and then people would go off because they saw it as a means to advocate for their neighborhood. And like yourself, they were an advocate for Chapel Hill. It wasn't like just your neighborhood needed to get all of the resources. And when they found that that wasn't a means of getting all of the resources directed towards their particular neighborhood, some of the interest went away. We are constantly looking to recruit. As a matter of fact, we had a gentleman today express interest in serving. So I'm hoping that we're at the other end of the pendulum shift. And because we can do them virtually now and people don't have to leave their home, we will get more people interested in serving. But time, dedication, because it does take some dedication, well, to serve, on the advisory board, and being committed to the entire public housing portfolio and not just your neighborhood were 3 of our biggest challenges.
Got it, thank you. And then just one last question. And because the resident advisory councils, there have been some challenges filling those. Are there other mechanisms for determining what residents need or want?
Yeah, there are. We do at least 3 surveys a year. When we are about to submit our capital fund paperwork, we have a meeting. It has been in person up until now, where people come and we send them a survey on changes they would like to see in the neighborhood. And then they can come to the meeting and share other perspectives or viewpoints. That's where the information came from about them desiring more training being made available to possibly secure employment. There's also the newsletter. And we do a random survey of people who have used maintenance services, like every 5th person that has used the maintenance. We'll call them, ask them, how did it go? Is there something they would have liked to see done differently? And now, as I mentioned before, we have the social work intern from the School of Social Work at UNC, who is going to be doing a skills assessment survey. So I'm hoping that that's also an opportunity for the residents to share information or ideas on things that they'd like to see done different, or how we can help them from our programming aspect to achieve certain goals that they have.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there other council members who had questions? Karen, then Hong Min.
So my question is, so you said that because of this, the closing down of Trinity Court that affected our score. Can you explain that why at the time we did not submit this demolition application or those paperworks to the HUD at that time, so that it will not, these units going to be taken out of the consideration when they are scoring us?
Well, there's actually two answers to that. The first answer is that we actually thought we could rehabilitate it and we would not have to demolish it. Once we got the engineering firm to come in and look at the property, we found that it was much worse than what we thought. So according to the demolition and disposition, it had to be at least 65% of the value of the property before it could be demolished. It wasn't that bad, so we could not have submitted it then. As we tried to do it later, I learned that the unit had to have been occupied within the last 18 months, and we had exceeded that time as we were moving families out, that it had not been occupied, or 40% of the units had not been occupied in the last 18 months. We did actually submit an application for disposition in, I want to say January of 19, but that is when we actually submitted our RAD application, and we were told, well, why don't we wait to see what the RAD conversion is going to look like before we start doing, I guess, individual demolitions, that this was all going to be tied in together. So we waited, and it was to our detriment.
I see. So given that, is there anything that we can do differently in the future? Because the score is certainly has raised some concerns in the community. So I think that we need to give a clear briefing to the community to make them understand that we actually are taking good care of our public housing. Is there anything that we can do to reestablish that confidence? I don't know if you have anything that's in planning.
And I don't necessarily agree that the confidence has been undermined. I think we've done a very good job of being transparent and being open. We've had several community meetings prior to COVID where we discussed exactly what was going on. And I believe if you talk to the residents who were living there at the time, they were extremely grateful just to move to another public housing unit that was better maintained. So I think going forward, I guess in making sure that our maintenance work and any contractor that we hire to do work, we're constantly evaluating and assessing so that we don't end up at a point where what we thought was done was not done. That we have means of checking and making sure that we have a timetable for when work needs to happen, and we're following up to make sure that indeed it did happen, that we don't have any other neighborhood or community that has property like Trinity Court. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. It's glad to know. I'm glad to know that has been taken care of and that we have a plan. And then you mentioned several times that you have sent out the surveys to the community. What is the response rate? Like, how many people actually respond to those surveys?
I don't have a number right off the top of my head, but I can definitely get that, and I can resend that to the entire council again.
Yeah, well, I think the reason I'm asking is trying to see what is the most effective way of responding, reaching out to the community. Well, especially during the COVID, I almost, like, there are surveys from the town, there are surveys from Orange County, there are surveys from all different nonprofit organizations. Sometimes I'm just like, I can't, people getting overwhelmed and doesn't know like which one I supposed to respond, and like, so I think, is there any way that the residents would prefer? Maybe they would prefer like a face-to-face interaction or door visit. I don't know if it's, of course, I would want to make sure that it's done in a safe way, but I don't know if you can,
Yeah.
I
My
don't know,
sense is that
some
they don't want
communication with,
door-to-door.
yeah, community, see what is the most effective way to reach out to them, because we do want to hear them, what their concerns are. And like you said, if there are any concerns or like the change of their employment status, all these things that can be somehow like we can be aware of those situations as early as possible.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Our residents have probably taken about 4 different surveys just in the last 2 months. So
Right.
I agree that that could be very overwhelming. I would also hazard a guess that they don't want door to door. So sometimes that random phone call, like I mentioned, after maintenance comes, that seems to be very appreciated. We have our maintenance workers who are still responding to emergency work orders. Sometimes they will get information. And believe it or not, our residents are pretty forthcoming. They will contact the office, they will call Lauren Clark's office, they will call the manager's office. So they're getting information to us. But the effectiveness of the survey, I'll definitely have to get back to you. I know they're low. I know they're low response rates.
Yeah, I think my general thinking is this is, of course, is a vulnerable community. A lot of times that those surveys or advice or like virtual meetings may work for other communities, but for this community, we may do something extra. Like you said, making random phone calls and like checking in. I think maybe these things are necessary for us to really understand what is going on and to get there any concerns or the changes in their life and all these things that we can be aware as early as possible. So I do really appreciate the work that you're doing, especially at this very challenging time.
Well, thank you. And like the council member said earlier, that resident advisory board would be very helpful. So if we were able to revive and get something intact, I believe that they would much more willingly share with peers than they would ever share with the administrative crew. So we're really hoping to get that together.
Yeah, well, I heard there's some other communities, they have some ambassadors, like someone like within the community, they're collecting information because they know their neighbors and they're like a residence ambassador or something. But they live in that community, they understand what's going on in their neighbors, and they're like being the link between the town and that community. And maybe that is something that we can consider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We had 3 members of our community serving as ambassadors. But again, 3 out of 12 neighborhoods, just again, we're not getting to everyone. So I would like to have a representative from every single community.
Okay. Karen?
Hi, Faith.
Hi, Karen. I'm sorry,
I just,
Segman.
it's okay. I have just a couple of questions. A lot of my questions have already been addressed. So in looking at the recovery agreement, I understand definitely about Trinity, and I really appreciate that you and our staff are flexible with our residents about rent payment. I know that can hurt our rating too, but I feel like, I'm willing to live with that. There were also some things around maintenance and safety and turnaround time that it sounds like you acted quickly to address. And I think you've talked about this before, but I wanted to confirm those things kind of can come back up if kind of the systems issues aren't addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like those have been addressed in terms of the staff you need or the systems you need to say that those problems don't reoccur?
Yes. The hiring of a maintenance supervisor was definitely a real boon for us, because then someone else whose total job is to make sure that those systems are being worked and they're being worked correctly, and I'm not trying to wear 4 and 5 different hats, helped a lot. Mm-hmm. Secondarily, having a second contractor do the unit turnarounds helped us not be at the mercy of one contractor. We normally give them 4 days to get into the unit, do the repairs that need to be done. But when we only had one, and they say, well, we're almost done. We're almost done. Now having a second one, there's a little more competition between the two of them. So they're trying to get as many units as possible because that's how they get paid. The first one felt as though they could take as long as they needed. So that has helped us speed up getting unit repairs done. So I believe we have, or we will continue to look at all of the systems that are in place to make sure that we're more timely in responding to the things that HUD is looking at.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And it looked like in the recovery agreement, part of the problem was us, that we're not doing, they don't think we're doing what we should be doing. So I know we have that training that we all need to do. Are there other things that look like that we are supposed to hold a certain number of meetings or discussions or something else? What is it we're not doing that we should be doing?
And to be fair, most housing authorities have a board. As a department of a town of elected officials where you're, while I would love to be your single focus, there are other things that you have to do. So I kept trying to explain to HUD that your request of the time that you need from my board is illogical because of the work that they do. So one of the compromises was the quarterly report, that if I could at least come before you, make sure you were aware of how we were doing on the FAST area, and that you would do the lead the way training so you were more familiar with the verbiage that they used in the letters that they would send out. Having you aware, they believe would keep me on my toes. So you're doing what you need to do. I just need to make sure that the information that I'm supposed to be providing is providing on a more regular basis. I waited till we had stuff. Let's talk about Trinity. Let's talk about, the resident council. So down, instead of just waiting until I have stuff, having regular quarterly reports provided to you will also give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have to make sure that you're informed.
Okay, yeah, I think you're keeping us on our toes, not the other way around. So, so another question is, so I know HUD isn't visiting because of COVID the way they normally do those site visits, but are they kind of assessing us from a distance? Or are they kind of pleased with the progress we're making? Or are we kind of out of touch?
No, you're right. They're not doing the face-to-face visits. They did have a conversation with the town manager and myself. I think they're very pleased with what we're doing in order to move us out of the trouble status. And they recognize that we're in the trouble status because of a condition that's making it better for our residents. So I don't think they're disappointed or upset. They just have to do their job like we have to do our job. So they stay in touch. And we also have a software system, secure systems that we put information in that they review on a regular basis. And if something appears out of whack, they'll give us a call and say, hey, I see you have an outstanding number of repayment agreements with your residents. You understand that's going to lower your score again. So let's look and see if we could do that differently. So one of the changes that we made in that area is we used to do, you owe us $150 back rent because you didn't pay it. We would just give you an idea of, you're telling me, when can you make that payment? So now in order to get a repayment agreement, we're asking for at least 50% upfront. Good faith money, just to make sure that you understand that this is an agreement of repayment and you are going to have to repay it. We did not get as much pushback as a lot of people thought we would. And I think because our residents know they had it really, really well. But that one thing changed the amount of money that we had on the books owing us. So that meant that that score became a little higher.
Great.
So they monitor, they call, they talk.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The last thing is just going to the conversation about resident advisory board. Have we, do we offer stipends to board members?
We haven't. We haven't. No particular reason.
I think we've been having this conversation for other reasons with other boards about that topic, and it was my job like 15 plus years ago to help organize those boards in South Estes and Trinity and help support those boards. And at that time we did offer a stipend for, all the reasons that, whether it's people need help with childcare or it's a meal time or whatever else, just no questions asked, it's just part of, asking for their input and expertise on the direction of our program. I think it's a valid expense. At that time, HUD did cover that. I don't know if they do anymore. And I also just want to thank you for those efforts. I know it takes a huge amount of staff time to organize folks. So I don't know if there's anything more we can do to help support you and your staff in that time. I don't know that you have staff whose job is really to do that, but I know it takes a lot of time. So
do you remember how much the stipend was?
It was a long time ago. I don't.
There might be a best practice that we can look and see what.
I'm sure, yeah, and I think Tyne may have some information on that we can talk about later, not tonight, but about some best practice around that.
Councilmember Stegman, I believe that those, I remember that years ago, and I think that Ross grant funds were used at the time, and they were used to support the Residents Council. I think there was a time where Ross grants were no longer available, but they may be coming back or may be available now. So Faith is nodding because I know I've heard a little bit about it. So that might be something you're pursuing.
Yeah, they are back.
Okay. You should look at that. Yeah, that would be great. Okay, I'm done. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Faith, thank you so much for the job you do. You care, you do it with passion. You're thorough, and we're always pleased to hear from you. Glad we'll be hearing from you quarterly now, I guess. Is that right? So,
you're very welcome.
Do you have what you need from us? Thank you for updating on us on this. And
I have what I need from you, and you remember that I am here if you need me. So as you go through that training, if you want to just shoot an email saying, what is this again? Let us learn together and make sure that we stay aware and alert.
Okay, thank you. Challenge our council members to get your training done. Shaking your head. After you get your ethics training done and that training, get all right. All right, thank you. Okay, our last item is future items for discussion. Turn this over to our manager and our attorney, and we have on the docket for that.
Council, I just wanted to, I'll provide you with a quick update on what we're looking at for October, and then Ann may have some additional comments. So right now for October, for our work session on the 21st, we'll have a COVID update, the continuation of our discussion and update on 160D as both Corey and Elisa mentioned this evening, and then we'll have a discussion of the climate action plan, the process for that and where we are to get your input on that plan before it is finalized. So just those are the topics that we have at this point. We do believe we have some room to add additional topics, at least one more maybe if council is open to that, or if a need pops up over the course of the next few weeks.
Well, you and I talked about adding a process for resolutions. If we have time for that for the October.
Yes, absolutely.
Were there other topics that council members wanted to see on work session? We haven't done this in a while. We used to ask annually what topics you'd like to see to go into more depth on work sessions. You don't have to think of them right now. You're welcome to shoot them to me and Maurice, just to say what things you'd like to have in-depth discussion on. We'd be happy to hear those. We've got a few more things lined up for, we don't have a work session currently scheduled for November because there's some weird dates in there, but we do have one for the first week of December. So, and then usually in the spring, we have one regular kind of work session. The rest of the work sessions are usually around the budget, but we're open to ideas. We have ideas, that'd be great. Okay, well, if you think of something, please shoot us a note. We do have a few minutes for comments from the public. I know a couple of people had asked if we had time, they'd like to speak. If they want to raise their hands in the participant list, Mr. Parker can find you and Ms. Harvey can help bring you over. We have Ms.
And Susanna Dancy would like to speak. That's the only hand that I'm seeing raised at the moment. And I think Amy is moving. There we go. There's Susanna.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. I don't have a video, but I guess that's just as well. You don't get to see my kitchen. Thank you. Oh, now I can do it. Start my video. There we go. Okay, thank you for the meaningful discussion tonight on the Community Design Commission and the discussion about the concept plan review process. It's clear that y'all have put a lot of thought into it, and I really appreciated the level of discussion for that. I think many of your ideas have a lot of potential. In particular, I think the CDC would endorse Councilman Parker's suggestion of checklists and standardization of materials in the concept plan review submission. Right now, the process is entirely up to the applicant, what they choose to submit. Councilwoman Ryan's comments about how potential projects relate to big picture planning and especially to infrastructure planning, I think those are topics that the CDC has talked about as well. Several of you said that everybody hates the concept plan review process. I would say that's not completely true, but that to the extent that it is disliked, the complaints are related to its current format. The goal of the CDC's goal in its petition was to make the concept plan review process more productive and relevant. It does provide, right now, the concept plan review process provides developers with important feedback from the public, and from one and sometimes two advisory commissions and from council. And that is important information to get back to the developers as part of the process. Submission for rezonings and for development review are very expensive, both in fees as well as in the engineering and prep work that you have to do for that. So I think the concept plan review process does serve a good purpose. The question is, how do we do it better than what we're doing right now? Let's see, looking at my notes. Adam's presentation included several options for reworking the concept plan review process. Two that were not on the list were, one, to keep the review with the CDC, with the existing boards that review it, which, as you know, are CDC and Housing Advisory Board and Council. So to keep the review process where it is, but to tweak, to change what goes into it, the context, materials, checklists, all of those things. The second option that was not on his list was to improve the application with those things, you know, the checklists and stuff, checklists and materials, but to have a joint planning commission and CDC meeting to review it together. So both of those, I think, would be very valid options as you move further along in this process. Again, thank you. We look forward to working with staff and with council on improving this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Michael, is anyone else?
No one else
Okay.
raised a hand, so I think that is all the public comment we have for this evening.
Okay, Michael, do you have the motion to move us to?
I absolutely do.
And before he reads, before he reads that out, you will have to log out of this meeting, and Amy Harvey has sent you a new link for the closed session meeting, just to let you know.
And the new link came after this meeting started or just before, so it's very new. I move that the council go into closed session as authorized by General Statute 13-318.11A3 to discuss, give instructions, and preserve attorney-client privilege regarding litigation brought by Chandler's Green Limited against the Town of Chapel Hill, Habitat for Humanity of Orange County, North Carolina, Inc., and Ballantyne Associates, PA. At the conclusion of the closed session, the council will adopt a single motion to end the closed session and adjourn the meeting without taking further action.
Second.
Been motioned by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Need a roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem Parker,
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson,
Aye.
Councilmember Boyancy,
Aye.
y'all are moving all around all the time. Councilmember Gu,
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn,
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan,
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman,
Aye.
and the mayor says aye as well. The meeting is now adjourned and we will see you in closed session. Thank you very much. May I leave now or? Okay. Thank you.